Taft-Morales. The title of this talk, Be Here Now.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks, everybody, for coming today. Ethical culture is most about relationships, about how we interact with each other and bring out the best in each other. But today I'm going to focus on ourselves as individuals a bit. I have a hard time being in the present sometimes. I'm often distracted by emails and phones and radio. I'm often thinking about the future, what I have to do later this afternoon or tomorrow or next week. Other times I'm pulled into worrying about the past, things that I could have done better. That happened to you at all? Never. You're all fully present here. Well, I'm going to try to explore in this last Sunday of the program season. I'm taking time off over the summer. I'm going to explore the challenge of the three simple words of the title of today's talk, Be Here Now. What does that mean? Is it a mantra that we can repeat simply to sort of offset the bad habit of being distracted and not being with each other all the time? Is it something that we do to try to avoid doing constantly, because we are, after all, human beings, not human doings? And I wonder whether it's something we do just to be more fully human. A lot of people who honor these three words do so by practicing meditation of some type. And I think it's a great thing to do. I urge you all to try to find your own version of a meditative practice. There are lots of meditation places in the city. How many people here do practice, every week or so or more? A couple of hands going up. See those people about what they do. I personally prefer just a simple breathing meditation, mindfulness meditation that I learned through Thich Nhat Hanh, who I'll talk a little bit about today. But this creating a non-reactive awareness that I find I get through my occasional meditation is what I am most interested in. But I'm not going to do meditation today. Some might think it misguided to try to talk about being here now, because some of life's mysteries cannot be unraveled with words. Sometimes you can't use your head to figure out all of what we need to know to live a good life, and maybe Be Here Now is a pretty good example of that. But habits die hard. I'm going to do what I always do on Sunday, and that's use words to try to explore, examine, suggest, maybe inspire. I'm even going to go so far as I'm going to divide my talk into three pieces, each for one of the words in the title. I'm going to talk about what it is to be, what it is to be here, and what it is to be here now. And again, that might be a counterintuitive way to try to achieve unified consciousness, but it's something that I find myself doing, and I find that I get around the other side of it eventually. So let's see how it works. So what do I mean by to be? What is it to exist? When I think about it as a humanist, I certainly don't refer to any supernatural qualities like a disembodied soul. So I'm going to focus on two natural parts of my experience today. One is my physical body, and the other is my stream of consciousness. The stream of consciousness is where I think I pulled the raw material out to try to construct my identity and my understanding of the world. So the first part I'm going to focus on to be the stream of consciousness. I'm going to talk about my physical body in the second part of my talk. So stream of consciousness was a term that I first read in the writings of William James. In the Principles of Psychology, over 100 years ago, he explained that, quote, consciousness does not appear to itself chopped up in bits. It is nothing joined. A river or a stream are the metaphors by which it is most naturally described. In talking of it hereafter, let's call it the stream of thought, consciousness, or subjective life. Now, the stream of consciousness is a term that, if you know American literature, or is very popular in the 20th century. It's often basically an inner dialogue that the author is having that's relayed to the reader in a narrative. But I'm going to emphasize an evolving psychological sense of being. The fact that I am, that Hugh exists, is bound up in my having a relatively continuous and coherent stream of consciousness. My point of view, my experience, is a somewhat unified psychological whole, totality. Now, when that stream is chopped up, like when you wake up and you don't know where you are or what day it is, you're sort of confused because you're in a different place, you have to sort of pull yourself together psychologically to sort of remember, oh right, I'm visiting my cousins and it's for the 4th of July, and now I get it. And your sense of identity returns to you. In this very deep way, I think to be is really about the project of trying to be whole, trying to be more complete, more of one cloth. Now, in theistic paradigms, many people talk about trying to become whole by becoming at one with God. Many people will interpret their own inner divisions as about being divided from God, being apart from God. And becoming whole is about reestablishing a connection to the divine. Now, this paradigm doesn't work for humanists like me who don't believe in a supernatural God. And for me, working towards a wholeness of consciousness occurs in the natural world of human experience. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Nothing is at last sacred but the integrity of your own mind." And integrity is another word for wholeness that I'm going to talk about more later. When the different parts of your life don't fit together, the divisions can be very painful and deep, and this can disrupt this integrity. Now, to ensure the sacred nature of our mind, often we seek therapeutic support in our quest for wholeness. I did at least. And there are many types of inner divisions, but therapists can often help us identify what's tearing us apart so that we can regain a sense of wholeness, of our unity, of our integrity. And in my own experience as a counselor and as a client, the most constant challenge to the wholeness is integrating what I consider the good and the bad parts of me. This inner division between what we call good and bad can keep us up all night. Especially if we're ethical humanists, because we're supposed to be ethical, right? So that when we are not, what are we supposed to do when we are confronted with this visceral sense of being torn in two? What do we do with the moments of our lives when we're not so ethical? How do we process the bad parts to achieve self-acceptance and wholeness? Now, Thich Nhat Hanh points out that the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful are all parts of our life. He counsels us to hold those parts together gently, compassionately in our consciousness. In an essay he wrote called Transforming Our Compost, Hahn urges us not to deny or reject the bad parts of us, those that we label that. Denial only allows what he calls the garbage, the suffering, the shame, the fear, the anger, to arise suddenly into our conscious life uncontrolled. And he believes that by embracing all of ourselves lovingly, we can turn this garbage into compost, into fertilizer for living a full life. As young children, when we experience division, the divisions can be deeper and harder to overcome. Being harshly scolded as a toddler for being selfish, for example, is something that can wound our psyche. Even later, we can intellectually say to ourselves, well, it wasn't that bad a thing. The pain can still remain, and the division can still be deep, well into adulthood. And when that wounding is chronic, when you live in a toxic environment, for example, where there's not enough love and a lot of hurt, children raised in those environments, these divisions can manifest themselves bodily, whether it's in addiction or eating disorders or other things. And I'm sure many people in this city and in this room have suffered in this way. And sometimes we try to repress the trauma. We bury our painful moments in the subconscious, avoiding processing them consciously. And without professional help, that might be the best we can do sometimes. But still, that trauma can come into our lives and divide this conscious whole, and we can feel shattered all over again. And therapy can collect these pieces together and support our efforts at a creative reintegration of the pieces so that they hold together better. Carl Jung, the psychoanalyst, helped his internally divided clients integrate various parts of their selves in a way to achieve what he called integrity. He used that word a lot. And integrity to him was a wholeness and a coherence of the psyche. Jung said that we cannot simply deny divisions. We can't banish our shadows forever from our lives. We have to try to accept them, he says, so that these elements can be used to heal and to become whole again. He wrote, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integrating of the contraries." So the good and the bad, or whatever divisions you feel divide you. In 1959, he added, "The psychological rule says that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside as fate." And what he meant by that was when inner divisions are deep inside and they're not made conscious and processed, our relationships can be divided. Our world can be torn in two. Now, often human beings are our worst enemies in that quite often it's our unethical behavior that divides us inside and denies us its integrity. And in ethics, we sometimes say that somebody has integrity if they're consistent, reliable, honest, if they keep their promises, if they finish what they say they're going to do. That's what we mean by somebody having integrity. But if we lie or if we deceive somebody we care about, that element tears our integrity apart. Felix Adler, in the reconstruction of the spiritual ideal, speaks of the spiritual pain that comes from the, quote, intolerable strain of the divided conscience. And sometimes this division is between what we say in public and what we do in private. And many types of division, though, can challenge us. Especially, Adler reminds us, people who are, quote, eagerly desirous to make their life whole, all of a piece, of achieving consistency in their conduct throughout. And I hope that's one of the reasons you come here, to live a more whole life. But often, even those of us who do pretty good at not doing things that we regret later can still get broken up by life, because that's the way life is. Deeply wounded people, survivors of the Holocaust, for example, or people who are victims of racism and bigotry historically in their lives, often struggle to be made whole because life has divided them. Many of you know Viktor Frankl, who I call on often here, who survived the prison camp in Auschwitz. He himself knew how challenged survivors can be, how divided they are. They can be plagued with physical trauma, loss of loved ones, horrible memories, and on top of all of that, guilt for having survived. And as a result, many of them became suicidal, and those were the people Frankl worked with the most. He said to many of his patients in so many words, "Imagine, however, if from this point on you have lived your whole life out to the final period of your life, that is death. And then you were allowed to come back to this moment and live it again, exactly as it would have happened with all the ups and downs that are going to happen to you, all the trials and tribulations, nothing about life that you could change except for your attitude. How would you live then?" And in that situation, he's urging his patients and all of us to exercise the freedom by choosing our attitude towards our life, by taking on the project of telling our own story. We can't deny what's happened and what will happen, but we can seize authorship of that narrative. That's how we make ourselves whole, by telling our story. It reminds me of some words that are familiar to many of you in this room that I will drop out the theistic element, but my mother often used. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. There are some things in life you cannot change. You do have the potential of changing your attitude. And Frankl called his approach logotherapy. Logotherapy, the taking of the whole. To take a shattered life, to reweave it into a unified story that offers hope and meaning. Hope and meaning. That's a project to become more whole. It's the heart of what I think it means to be. I think in a lot of ways, to be is to be whole. Let's move on. What does it mean to be here? How should a humanist approach this without the assumption of a soul or a heaven? Here is being aware and comfortable of my physical existence. About being fully aware of being inside my skin and on this planet. It's about being alive in this thin, porous membrane that we call the biosphere, connected with all life that we know of. This thin biosphere provides nutrients and shelter for us to live. It's wrapped around a ball of shifting magma and crust, 7,900 miles in diameter. It's 93 million miles from the sun that it's been orbiting for 4.5 billion years, give or take a few, at roughly 66,000 miles per hour. And that speed is only relative to the solar system. Relative to the center of our galaxy, the Earth moves approximately 483 miles per hour. And that doesn't take into account the path of the Milky Way compared to other galaxies through the universe. Bottom line, we're on this tiny planet, sailing through the void of space. That's where we are from birth until death. And seen this way, that is an awe-inspiring reality at where we are, fundamental to my humanism. It's a reality that often fades into the background of our lives. But sometimes when I'm caught up in the struggles of life and I'm just trying to get more grounded, I try to remind myself of that ultimate reality. And when I do, when I remember my place in the big scheme of things, literally, my internal divisions don't seem so dire. The anxiety about tomorrow's meeting or the regret about something I did yesterday don't break me to pieces so easily. I'm here. We're here on this planet, the only home we'll ever know. That to me is an awe-inspiring understanding of what here means. Now, maybe you are like my wife, who said that this way of approaching the word here, the little mantra, be here now, was not helpful. Considering herself flying on this planet through a void of space actually made it harder for her to be here now. It didn't center her thoughts, it scattered them. So I get it if you too find this little mind game that I played just now not helpful to you either. But let me explain a little bit more what I mean. My humanism is fundamentally naturalistic. Whatever view of life humanists embrace, I think whether it's a secular humanism or whether it's what some might call a nature-based spirituality, I think that it must embrace our place on this planet. And I think the lack of that appreciation is one reason why we're in the problems we are with climate change. John Shelby Spong, a retired Episcopal bishop, thinks that traditional theism no longer works. And I think he got it right when he said what is both obvious and profound. He said, heaven is not our home, the planet Earth is. Now, some of what makes this truth both profound and obvious is wrapped up in the humility that I believe it carries. And I think that humility is an important part of a humanist worldview and an important part of being here. Humility is important because I think we need it. I think it's part of our psyche that helps us get grounded. And theists can compare themselves to an all-powerful, all-encompassing God, and they can engender humility in their worldview that way. But for me, humility arises when I compare myself in this tiny little planet to the rest of the universe. It's tiny just compared to our solar system. Our solar system is tiny compared to the galaxy, and the galaxy is tiny compared to the universe. Our sun is only one of 100 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy. I've given this example before. How much is 100 billion? Imagine a bucket that you pour 1,000 marbles into. And then imagine you get 999,999 more buckets and you pour 1,000 marbles into each of those. And then say you did that 100 times over. That's 100 billion. That's how many stars we have in this galaxy. And that's just one galaxy. There very well may be more galaxies in the universe than there are stars in the Milky Way. If that's not humbling, I don't know what is. Carl Sagan, who in my eyes epitomized a natural, religious, scientific humility, wrote, "We find that we live on an insignificant planet of a humdrum star, lost in a galaxy, tucked away in some forgotten corner of a universe in which there are far more galaxies than people." Contemplating the size of our body and this planet can also engender an appreciation for the beautiful fragility. Astronaut James Irwin, looking at our planet from outer space, hanging in the blackness, said, "The Earth reminded us of a Christmas tree ornament hanging in the blackness of space. That beautiful, warm, living object looked so fragile, so delicate, that if you touched it with your finger, it would crumble and fall apart. Seeing this has to change a person." Soviet cosmonaut Sigmund Yan agreed. "Before I flew, I was already aware of how small and vulnerable our planet is, but only when I saw it from space in all its ineffable beauty and fragility did I realize that humankind's most urgent task is to cherish and preserve it for future generations." Maybe it's overreach to try to put the whole universe into that one little word of that mantra, "be here now." And maybe some will find that it gets in the way of being fully present, a distraction from the meditative presence we try to cultivate, but like in a yoga class, for example. But for me, bringing it to my mind, bringing that wondrous nature of our physical existence on this planet, and induces a sense of privileged gratitude for being alive in this thin, glistening membrane of life that surrounds us. It inspires me, and I need no supernaturalism to be here. What does it mean to be here now? How does our quest to be whole and centered and on this planet incorporate time? In some ways, the answer might be obvious. If we are to be here, we're to exist in wholeness and on this planet, we only have the present to be here in, right? Because the future is not yet and the past hasn't come yet. But that little bit of logic, I think, only goes so far, because like many of you, I still divide time up. I divide it up relentlessly, thanks to my Google Calendar. I have my time, my private time, I got my work time, I got my family time. And I think I do this because in some ways it makes me think that I have some control. As Omar Khayyam says, and we'll hear more about this summer, he wrote, "Oh, threats of hell and hopes of paradise, one thing is certain, this life flies." But I want to pretend otherwise. I want to deny time's power as it marches relentlessly forward despite my efforts to slow it down. And dividing my time up makes me think I can squeeze a little more time out of that resource. Of course I can't. And it can also make it hard to be fully present. I'm distracted by checking how much time I have left on the meter of my time, or this talk, or today's work hours. I anticipate the next segment of time, what I have to do, and I'm pulled into the past. And maybe I should stop dividing my time and live in the present. Because that's what mindfulness is in a lot of ways. Years ago, my mother was in AA, as you could guess, and she would remind us all, but mainly remind herself with another cute little sort of fortune cookie expression. She would say, "The moment is a gift. That's why they call it the present." And it helped her remain sober, and it gave us a couple of good decades of family closeness and love. It was around that time that I started to practice some meditation at the Stillwater Meditation Center near my home, where I would shut my eyes and breathe deep and slow and repeat simple phrases like breathing in, I breathe in peace, breathing out, I breathe out in patience. But my monkey mind, as it was called, would interfere. Ram Dass, who wrote a book entitled Be Here Now, said that the monkey mind was our tendency towards distraction, to mentally grab a hold of every idea and sensation that got into our consciousness, one after the other in constant motion. Like a restless monkey, my mind would grab onto everything, whatever it could to get hold of it. It would distract me from my breath, from being present, from being now. Yoga helps me to a degree. The flow of the body, combined with mindful breathing, can bring me back to the moment. When I shared this talk topic with my yoga instructor, Francesca, she said that the words "be here now" reminded her of one word: practice. For her, yoga helps her notice when she's lost in thoughts or hopes or fears. And like mindfulness meditation, yoga puts breath at the center of practice. And when thoughts arise in her or in us and distracts us from the presence, Francesca urges us to notice, just to notice that, and to gently return our attention to our breath. And simple, regular practice can develop, she says, stability and clarity and strength. Not happiness. That's something that we can chase for a long time. Quite often, happiness is more a result of having good relationships or having creative work. But that's not what I'm focusing on today. Being here now is not about being happy. Francesca also explained that it's hard to be here now because biologically we evolved at a time very different than today, where our nervous system was constantly on guard for danger. We're not very strong or fast creatures, so we had to be aware of potential dangers, attuned to anticipate multiple threats. We're always on, she said. Biological research shows that. A Shambhala Buddhist meditation supervisor of hers, Ethan Nichtern, used this expression. He said, it's as if our doorbell sounded like a fire alarm. So that every time somebody comes up to our door, and whenever an idea enters our mind goes, oh, gotta pay attention, and we grab hold of it and start to analyze it. Because that's what our body was trained to do, to be aware constantly of what might be a threat. So it's useful to use the body or breathing as a tool to refocus attention when our alarms go off, to remind us. And I think it's important that we notice that and return more gently to our breath, to our body position, to our flow, so that we can be more present. And it's something that I think is better guided in the heart than in the head. It's not something you can necessarily think yourself to. Ram Dass puts it this way. He says, the heart surrenders everything to the moment. The mind judges and holds back. So I think it's the judging that can draw us most away from the present moment. And getting an attitude of loving kindness towards ourselves, towards what's happening in our body and our mind at the moment, that should be more of a goal. John Amodio, a psychotherapist and a long-time devotee of Ram Dass, said that we should, quote, develop a friendly relationship with our feelings without clinging to them or being overwhelmed by them. A gentle awareness towards our human emotions opens up a middle path between overly identifying with feelings, blindly merging with them, and pushing them away. So I think rather than a strict discipline, a gentle kindness towards oneself is the most useful way to be here now, to be with oneself. So let me conclude. I'm here now. I won't be this summer. I take off the summers these days to try to do more writing and reading and to try to be and not do. So I hope you take a little bit of this maybe through your June, July, and August. Take what you need, leave the rest, as they say. Take some time to be present in the moment and be aware of the big picture. Remind yourself of where you are in time and space. Notice your feelings. Don't judge them. Notice your habit of planning and worrying, and then return gently to the present. Maybe you can nurture an awareness that will help you be more whole. And if you can, you'll be better at bringing out the best of others and thus in yourself. Seek gentleness. Seek support from others, whether therapists or friends. And I wish you luck in working to try to be here and to be here now. Thank you.